Hello everyone, welcome to track 1, and the session is about design thinking in agile organizations. Speaker is Melanie. She's a co-founder and chief experience officer of the Co8 group. So Melanie is a customer experience leader with a business agility mindset. Her ability to help teams integrating OKRs, design thinking, service design allows for the rapid alignment of customers and business needs. So last but not the least, Melanie is an enthusiastic instructor, facilitator, mentor, and public speaker. So with this, I'll hand it over to Melanie.
Thank you, Raja, for the introduction. Good morning, good evening, everyone. It's bright and early here in Boston. It's a pleasure being here. And as Raja mentioned, I'm co-founder of the Co8 group, and some of you yesterday might have heard Rob's session on OKRs. And in our mind, what we do here at the Co8 group is really help organizations accelerate results, and we do that through three connected lenses. So if you attended the OKR session, you understand the value of alignment. And then when we think of customer experience, design thinking, it's directly connected to being well aligned to what matters most to an organization. And then the idea of executing efficiently and with quality, that's where the agile practice comes in. So for us, when we work with organization, it's really this mosaic of seeing where the organization is at and understanding how the pieces of the puzzle fit together to really help each organization on their way to accelerating results. And for me, in my journey as Chief Experience Officer, I started earlier in my career really on the UX side of things. And I quickly realized that by the time that the UX group was engaged, a lot of important decisions had been made about the project. So often the scope was locked in, the time frame was locked in, the budget was locked in. And we kept making important discoveries further downstream. And it felt like we were leaving a lot of important opportunities behind. So it's been, when I discovered design thinking, it helped us move some of this important discovery up front and keep this learning and discovery mindset throughout the project. So today what I'll be talking about is really to share with you the why design thinking, the important kind of like aspect under the surface. So if you understand the why and the value proposition of design thinking, when you think of either implementing it in your organization or evolving how design thinking is implemented, you can go back to this foundation. And there are plenty of awesome resources available online for really ideas for techniques and how to do it. And some of them are from the D School at Stanford, IBM Design Thinking. They have a great playbook, Luma Institute. So we can drop these in the chat later on. So I just want to set expectations for today in our short time together to really help you understand the why and the value of proposition of design thinking. So then as you read additional material and you start practicing, you have this foundation. So when we think of design thinking in agile organization, the way I think about it is that there is so much overlap with the agile mindset. And sometimes we just speak a little bit of a different language, or it's different groups in the organization, leading the design thinking initiative, or working in an agile way. Often, we think of more engineering teams. And the focus of both is really about delivering value to customer and doing so in the most cost-efficient way and really in the pursuit of value and quality. So this is why design thinking is a lightweight methodology. And it's really about the individuals and the interaction. When we talk here about the Agile Manifesto value working software, it's really a bias towards action, prototyping, testing ideas, customer collaboration. The customer is front and center, working with us in the discovery process. And we respond to change because design thinking is really about this continuous discovery. So in my mind, there's so much overlap. So it's just about getting different groups in the organization to decide how will we work together and what is our shared language. So again, here in some of the 12 principles of the Agile Manifesto, the first couple of ones speak directly to design thinking mindset. So why design thinking? What I've observed very often is we have a lot of firsthand knowledge of the people we serve, and sometimes our own knowledge serves as a proxy for the customer. So as we define a project or a new feature up front, we spend most of our time defining business requirements, technology requirements, and using our own knowledge of customers to define what they want. And while our goal is to land in that, golden place here in the middle of the little diagram, we often discover later on that what our customers truly needed might have been different, or there were new needs more important needs that we didn't know up front. And I'll give you a couple of examples, a couple of use cases. And I saw we have someone from GE Aviation on the call. And this example is from the GE Healthcare. And a few years ago already, GE Healthcare created this MRI machine, and it won some design awards. And Doug Dietz, the design lead, really wanted to go see the MRI machine in action at a hospital. And if you've ever seen Doug Dietz speak, he's an incredibly empathetic guy. And you can imagine how he felt the first morning at the hospital when the very first patient was a child, a small girl with her parents, and the little girl was absolutely terrified. And her parents were trying to reassure her, telling her to be brave. And when Doug Dietz saw that, his heart sank. He realized that they had failed their most vulnerable stakeholder in all this. Because if you ever experience an MRI in a medical setting, it's very cold, it's very sterile, right? Rightly so, to keep the MRI functioning well. But as a human experience, especially from a child's perspective, it's quite intimidating. So at that time, Doug Dietz had heard about design thinking, and he's like, wow, we cannot go back to the drawing board and redesign the machine. It's too big of an investment in the timeline. So he went he did the boot camp at the design school at Stanford. And during a week, you learn the practice, and then you get to think about your project. And what emerged from that is this really awesome solution. What they did is they created themes for each of the rooms where children would have their MRIs to make it more familiar to them, to the world that they experience on a day-to-day basis. And even the radiologist was in costume, in character. And I think the example they give in this article here is one of the room was a pirate adventure. So they even incorporated in all the sounds that the MRI machine makes. You go through a storm, and at the other end, you're going to discover a treasure. And it's really interesting because the change that they saw in the children from being terrified of the procedure, at the end of the procedure, they're like, oh, Mom, that was so much fun. Can we do it again? So in a very cost-effective way, very creative way, they were able to see the experience through the children's eyes and create these rooms without having to modify the machine. So these are just stencils that they created. So to me, this is a very powerful example of design thinking. It came after the design of the machine. And yet they arrive at an incredibly powerful solution. The other example I'm going to give here, some of you might be part of the gig economy, and I'll tell the story here from the perspective of independent workers here in the U.S. For the experience of the independent workers here is that the income can be unpredictable. They can spend a lot of time chasing payments from clients. They don't have access to benefits of traditional organizations. And here in the U.S., that can be healthcare. It can be retirement plan. It can be life insurance. So those benefits are usually available through an employer when you're a full-time employee. And for independent workers, that falls more on you to sort that out. From the company's perspective, when they work with contractors, there's a significant overhead in managing contracts and contractors and payments. So when the Prudential Insurance was thinking about it, they were thinking, currently they have no ways of providing services to gig economy worker because it's all set up for traditional workers. So using a design thinking mindset, my favorite phrase from design thinking is how might we, right? How might we provide value to the independent workers while being able to develop a new suite of services for them? So what they ended up doing through a design thinking process is that they developed a platform called the Merlin platform. And the platform itself is kind of like, that's where the employer and the contractor negotiate their contracts, and that's going to be their place for managing hours and payments. And at the same time, this is where Prudential offers all these extra services to the gig workers, such as disability insurance, health insurance, personal life. So they really had to step out of their traditional model to say, there's this economy, the gig economy is growing so fast, how can we be part of it? So it was really looking at all the different stakeholders and thinking creatively of new services. So those were the first couple of examples, use cases that I want to share with you of how design thinking has shaped products and services. So for me, the most important thing, the way I think about design thinking is the 3P. With design thinking, we develop a deep understanding of the problem that needs to be solved, of the people we are designing for, their hopes, their needs, their goals, and of what's possible. So that is to take time to open up our thinking, to evaluate different possibilities, test them, and then converge back down to the most promising solution. So if there's one slide to hold on today, it's this one. You might want to take a moment to screenshot it, the 3Ps, right? What is the problem we're solving? Who are we solving it for? And what's possible? So if you look, I think it's IDEO.org. They have a lot of really nice resources, and they'll be thinking about the design thinking mindset. And this is my evolution of this design thinking mindset based on their material. And the first one is empathy. And we often say, to walk in somebody else's shoes. And someone said, in order to walk in someone else's shoes, you have to take off your own shoes first. And for me, that really encapsulates it. And as it ties into the number 2 here, beginner's mindset, we bring so much expertise, so much experience, so much knowledge that sometimes it's hard for us to set that aside and say, for this moment, I will really try to see the world through the people we're designing for, through their eyes. And part of the design thinking process is embracing ambiguity. Sometimes I think of the design process, you're pulling it out of the mud. You're trying to discover what's there. You don't want to close it down too quickly. And we will go validate what we're learning. The fourth one, it's my favorite one, optimism, the belief that we can make a positive difference in people's lives, both for our customers and as a business, really positive ways of working. That's positive interactions, dynamic way of working, bias for action. The fifth one, creative confidence. Everyone is at their core creative, and let's leverage that. The sixth one, the number 6 here again, is that bias towards action. If we think back of the Agile Manifesto, less documenting, but let's just create that quick prototype, that quick visualization of what's in our head and start giving it shape and get feedback. Learning from experiments. This is where I changed the language from fail fast. The purpose, if you haven't learned anything from an experiment, you've truly failed. But if you've conducted an experiment and the experiment has failed, but you've learned something, this is the true win, right? So you can pivot, you can great, we've learned this up front, we can pivot. So depending on your organization, some people might be more comfortable with fail fast. I find that learn quickly from experiments also resonates. And iterate across the value stream. How can we constantly create the most lightweight artifact to validate our learning? And I'll speak about that again a little bit more in a minute. So there are typically 5 phases of design thinking, and as you search on the web, the language might change a little bit. So discover, reframe, ideate, prototype, and test. So the discovery, let's see. I think the ideal one, the first phase here, they call it empathize. For me, I go back to really the label of discovery, especially as we bring design thinking inside of our organizations instead of hiring a consultant. The very first step is really important to think of this internal discovery. Let's align on what we know. Let's take time to unpack, visualize, discuss what we know about the project. Even though everybody might have read the same emails, the same memos, we're rarely aligned out of the gate. And the couple of examples I'll give you today of techniques will be to do just that. Align on what we know. And once you're aligned as internal team, then let's augment what we know with our design research. Let's go talk to the people we're developing those products and services for. Let's go observe them in their environment. Let's take time to talk to them with open-ended questions so we can truly understand and give them room to express what's really on their mind. Then when we come back with this information, this is where we reframe maybe the problem statement. Here's was our initial problem statement. Let's reframe it with our new knowledge. And then let's start to brainstorm some ideas and create some, quick and dirty prototypes to then have to validate with our customers, and then we test it. So those are some validation cycles here that can happen quite rapidly. What I like about design thinking is it often resonates with people with a science background because it's quite similar to the scientific method. You might start with a question, you do some research, you construct your hypothesis, you test with an experiment, you analyze your results, and you draw a conclusion. And at any point, depending on what you find, you will reframe how you think about the problem. And design thinking is very, very similar to that. The next few slides I'm going to show is how design thinking is similar to other frameworks and how organizations have, taken design thinking in and reshaped it for their culture. So what I find interesting with a lean startup model is the loop is build, test, learn. My favorite example is already 20 years ago here in the US when Zappos, an online shoe store, decided to launch an online store. Nobody had done that before. So traditionally, what a company would have done is that they would have built a full e-commerce website. They would have built a full inventory and a full distribution system, and then say, go, do people want to buy shoes, right? It's quite a big investment. So what they did instead is that they built the most minimal front-end website, literally with twine and duct tape. They went to stores and took pictures of shoes at stores. They did not build their own inventory, loaded up those pictures on their website. And then as orders started coming in, they would have runners, they would run to the store, buy the shoes, and then ship them. What this allowed them to do was very quickly and very cheaply validate their very first hypothesis. Do people want to buy shoes online? And from there, they were able to go get more funding and really start building out their business model. So here, the next few examples is, I was talking a moment ago about how traditionally we think of design thinking as 5 phases. Here I'm going to show you how different organizations have been adapting this model and evolving the language to fit their organization. So this is from a digital agency in New York City, Philosophy. And for them, they think about design thinking as experiment-driven design. And their 3 key phases is understand, ideate, and make. Here are a couple of examples from Cisco. They distill down those 5 phases into 3: discover, define, explore. And here's an example from IBM: observe, reflect, and make. So as you embark on your journey, your design thinking journey, feel free to adapt and experiment with the language. What resonates with your organization? Is there a language that you're already using that you can leverage? And you know, since today the topic is design thinking in agile organization, it's interesting to see how SAFE has been integrating design thinking in their graphic. So it's right here in the middle where it says customer centricity. It's still kind of like off to the side. And to me, this points to the work that we do at the front end, right? To discover the big why. I'll show you a graphic in a minute about that fuzzy front end. But what I find interesting is here when we talk about continuous delivery pipeline, we talk about continuous exploration. So how might we continue during the development phase to discover key insights from our customers by continuing to ask open-ended questions and to keep testing new ideas before we fully commit and develop features. So by the time we release features, we have a high level of confidence that it will resonate. And this is where I'm going with my next slide. And so just take a step back, right? Our usual way of working, let's face it, we are problem solvers. We see an opportunity or a problem, and we're smart. It's like, yeah, you know, here's a solution for it. What design thinking invites us to do is, again, I'm a bit of a broken record on that. It's like, let's go back to take time to truly understand what the problem is. It will pay off greatly. And the other part is, let's also take time to articulate the desired outcomes. And this is where, again, it works so well with a framework like OKRs. And with that in mind, then the solution will come. So we have to let go of the solution a little bit to fall in love with the problem and to fall in love with the outcome. And then as sometimes the heated debate is around the solution, but there would be far less friction if we focus on the problem that we're truly trying to solve and the outcome. It's pretty powerful. Keeping an eye on the clock. So here's the fuzzy front end, right, that I was alluding to a minute ago. So often we have an idea, we hear something from a customer, we read a market research report. It's like, yeah, you know, this is it, let's go. And then we go straight to implementation. And where the squiggly line is, it's what we call that fuzzy front end. It's like how much work happens here in terms of discovery and validation, or not. So for me, and this part usually really resonates with product owners, the product managers. So it's about managing risk. So we have an idea, and back to the graphic of the fuzzy front end, we're like, yeah, this is a great idea. Let's fully commit to it and go build it. So right away out of the gate, we have a high level of investment. But what we don't realize at that moment in time is that our level of certainty is actually low, right? If we think back of our Zappos example, at the beginning, when they said, I wonder if people want to buy shoes online, they matched their level of investment with their level of certainty. At first, the level of certainty, what is the fastest and cheapest way that we can validate that? And as you go through a few validation cycles like this, as your level of certainty increases, it only makes sense to increase your level of investment. So when your level of certainty is low and your level of investment is low, this is where the idea of fail fast, learn fast, and then you can, invest. Some people go by the rule of 5 people, 5 weeks, $5,000 to validate some of those early ideas, and then you can pull the plug quickly on those early concepts if they don't. If they're not promising. Keeping an eye on the time. So for me, over time, I've also kind of like bubbled up my fourth truth based on organizational behavior and also from lean principle. And really to think about how people make decisions, because this will be key. We see a lot of like awesome design thinking workshop, a lot of great ideas come up. And then some of those great ideas fail to see the light of day. And why is that? And so the balance here is, it is in our nature that we value firsthand knowledge more than if somebody tells you, this is a great idea. If you have those insights yourself, you are far more likely to support decisions when you've been involved. So for me, the first two here on the left connect together. And then the idea that even the best ideas need to bring broad support. So as you implement your design thinking practice in your organization, as you evolve it, to really tend carefully to how do we bring people into the loop? You don't want to make it so bloated that the entire organization is involved into each project, but really to design it with intent to bring people along for the journey, to have regular readouts. I did a design thinking project with an organization, and one of the lead engineer was participating and leading some of the interviews with the customers. And for him, it was such a great relief to be able to ask those open-ended questions. There was no hidden agenda of trying to sell new features or to convince customers of, the way things work is the best way. And so in that sense, we took the engineer off some of his coding work, but to participate at some key junctures in the user research, in the design research, and that was tremendously valuable. So we get a lot of questions of, well, how do we integrate that with our Scrum sprints? We can talk about that. It's really about your desired outcomes and thinking about, the coding is really important, and also let's carve out time to continue to validate and learn about our customers. And the last quadrant here in the lower right corner is from the lean principles, right? Information is lost with each handoff. Relearning is very expensive. So again, how do you keep people along for the journey, to keep them informed, to keep them excited about these customer insights and ideas that are surfacing for the organization. All right, so here we're going to pivot a little bit. I'm going to share with you a couple of techniques that are really useful at the beginning of a project or at any time we feel that we might be losing our way a little bit, right? Sometimes during a project or development cycle, we go down some rabbit holes. And it's like, okay, let's come back to, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? And there's something very powerful about a clear, concise problem statement. So it's one sentence. It describes current state. It is not aspirational. In your problem statement, we avoid for solutions and we go for simplicity. So this is literally, being at the grocery store and running into somebody, how are things? And it's like, it's like, things are going great, but here on this project, right? Here's the here's what we're trying to solve. So that's my problem statement, my way of thinking about the problem statement. So if we go back to our MRI, use case at the beginning, the initial problem statement here would be children are scared of the MRI machines or the MRI procedure. No solutions embedded in that. And it's like, okay, great. Let's try to go address that. And it actually takes practice to write those very, very simple problem statements. I'm sure you've all experienced this in your careers. It's far easier for things to be complicated. It's simplicity that takes a little more practice. So for me, this is like a true gem. So this is from the Luma Institute. It's their problem tree analysis, and I'm always grateful to them each time I present it. So with the problem tree analysis, so let's put in the middle here the problem statement, what they call the focal problem. So children are scared of MRI machine. And if we go back to the design thinking phases, right, at the very beginning in our discovery, let's align on the problem as we currently know it as a team. It's like, okay, here's what we know. So some of the causes of that is that the MRI is loud, the MRI environment is unfamiliar, it feels threatening, and they're told to be brave by their parents. The parents can stay. Once they're in the machine, they're told not to move. That is scary for even an adult, right? So at the beginning of the project, what do we currently know? And then as you go talk to families, talk to their children, observe them, you would be evolving your understanding of the causes. The one that is especially interesting is the effects, right? What is the impact of the problem? In this case, the children might need to be sedated. If they are very anxious and they're very jumpy, usually the solution is to sedate them. And this has a cascading effect. It truly increases the costs of each procedure. Each procedure takes longer. And quite frankly, children walk away from this whole experience. Let's put it this way. They are not looking forward to their next MRI. So when we think about this, this is where when we do a full design thinking workshop, we use these as seeds for the outcomes that we want, some of the solutions that we want. So from here, where I will go today is looking at all this. How would we create a how might we statement? So here I'm skipping a few steps because it's a short presentation. And maybe that's another takeaway here, that try this over the next week, right? Try to integrate how might we, at least once at work this week. So a how might we statement focuses on the outcome. We don't have solutions embedded in them, are right size, not too big, not too small, and are phrased as a question. And I like the fact that they're phrased as a question because they invite multiple solutions. If we go back to the earlier screen, we're problem solvers. We come up with a solution. It's like, yeah, that's the one. So when we open it up as a how might we, it helps us in that divergent phase of design thinking. So here are some examples. Back to our MRI machine. Our initial problem statement is children are scared of MRI machine. So one how might we statement is how might we make children less anxious? This is interesting. That's a good way to get started. But if you talk to that anesthesiologist, it's like, yeah, we're going to sedate them. But you might want to explore the solutions. Another way of crafting our how might we statement is how might we make MRI machines less scary for children by having children visit MRI rooms more often. If you notice in this one, we've embedded a solution. So I would caution against that because then you don't have the full benefit of your design thinking process to really open up what's possible. And the last one, maybe that's the one that we would go with, how might we make the MRI experience easier for children by creating a friendlier experience? So here we're putting some parameters. How can we make it friendlier, but we're not describing the solution. So as you experiment with it, keep those things in mind. the right size, not too constrained, not too broad, and without embedding the solution. So some takeaways, and after that we'll pivot to a few questions. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Keep coming back to the desired outcomes. Let go of the solution early in the process. See the problem through the eyes of the people that you're designing for, that you're creating those products and services for. The first solution is rarely the best, although we are often very attached to our first solution. And test early and learn as fast as possible. And I think that's it. So we'll turn over to
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Melanie. I can help you out with the questions. So it was a great session. So let me read out the questions.
Okay.
So the first question is, does technology also play a role in design thinking, or it is more on the creativity side?
Yeah, it's interesting because design thinking can be a very, very low-tech proposition. And the way I think about it is like, what is the least amount of artifact that we can create to test an idea? And as you go down your level of certainty, you increase, your investment in the technology or of building out what you intend to do. Another way of answering this question is, especially now in this time of COVID and remote working, we rely more and more on remote collaboration. So yes, and there are also a lot of tools for remote collaboration. We use digital boards like Miro and Mural. Those are becoming very popular for aspects of the design research. I hope this answers it.
Okay, thank you. So next question is there a design thinking maturity model? If yes, how do you measure the maturity across enterprise or the product or process?
Mm-hmm. There's, how they call the Design Management Institute has been, it's been their mission to quantify maturity models in organizations. So I would point you to their website. So that's the Design Management Institute.
Okay, good. So the next question is, what is the difference between design thinking and systems thinking? What synergies are exploited in order to have a successful outcome?
Oh, I love this question. Thank you for asking it. I think I'll use the word mistake. I would like to use something a bit more nuanced, but a mistake that I see happening with design thinking right now is that we go for the lowest hanging fruit and we don't truly solve at the root cause. And for me, when we think of system thinking, is the ability to zoom out and take time to understand the big picture, the interconnectedness, and the complexity of situations, and come up with a plan to address at the root cause. So I hope I'm understanding the idea of system thinking correctly as intended.
Okay, so let me read out the next question. One second. So the next question is, there are multiple design thinking frameworks involving different steps in each of them. Assume if an enterprise, if there is already a framework in implementation in a BU, business unit, is it mandatory to standardize a DT process framework instead of using multiple frameworks across the organization?
That's an interesting question. I go back to the early point I made, right? There's so much overlap between design thinking and Agile in its approach and what it's intended to do, and yet we speak a different language, which creates friction. So it's an invitation to find ways to standardize, to gain efficiency. So we speak the same language. So there is value in working together to to define what is our language. So for instance, at Cisco, it's been a big effort to standardize around those three phases and share the same language. So you'll benefit from it, and it's always an invitation to collaborate.
Okay, so thank you. So the next question is, how do we go to the HMW statements from problem tree? Can you please elaborate on the in-between stages?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, this is a good question. So when I start with how might we? So how might we? So children are afraid of the MRI. So when we look at the causes and the effect, if we start integrating one of these, what I call parameter in your how might we statement, you build in a little bit of a constraint with it. So for instance, how might we reduce the time of a procedure for the MRI, right? So if we think about the effect of children being anxious, the duration is longer. So how might we make it more comfortable for children and reduce procedure time? And you'll notice that your problem tree analysis can also become your metrics as you test out ideas. So, right, where do we want to move the needle? So reduce time of each procedure, reduce time, number of sedation, happiness metrics for the children. So for me, that again, if you walk away with one thing today, that problem tree analysis, you'll get a lot of mileage with it.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. And let me go to the next question. So, how do we distinguish a good versus a bad formulation of a problem statement? After all, the solution will only be as effective as the question was.
Yeah, it takes practice. If you were in the OKR session yesterday, it's the exact same thing. It takes a little practice to get to that simple problem statement, and be kind to yourself. You know, it's as we develop new ways of working, you'll create your first problem statement. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And as you go down in your project, you'll realize, our problem statement is complicated. So at any time, feel free to, again, as a team, through the collaboration, can we reframe our problem statement, and let's keep developing our muscle for crafting more effective problem statement. I would move away from the good and bad. I would think of how can we create more effective problem statements.
Okay, thank you. So I think I have covered all the questions, and one participant wants to see the slide on the MRI, questions of MRI again. So I'm not sure what question he has.
I'm happy to share my screen again. Which slide was that?
Yeah, he's talking about how might we question for MRI again. I'm not sure what he is. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. You want to see? You want how might we slide? I don't know. I didn't get his question.
Yeah, I think he replied yes, and also thanks.
Okay, cool.
Okay, you want to just look at the slide. Okay.
Probably you would have taken a screenshot.
Yeah, fine. So I have covered all the questions. So Ebin, if you have any questions, you can ask.
I don't have any questions. Wonderful session, Melanie. You really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And I feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I can drop my LinkedIn in the chat here, if that's appropriate.
Yes, you can.
And I look forward to continuing the conversation. And
okay.
Thinking journey.
Yep. First of all, thanks for all the participants for joining the session. And thanks, Melanie, for giving us great insights with some very good examples on design thinking, which is a difficult topic to understand. So, yep. So, and you got a very good feedback from the participants. So they loved your session, especially your presentation skills. Maybe you can take a session on presentation skills next time. Okay.
It comes from a place of passion, so that's
Yeah.
always
So that's
okay.
all from me. So thanks, Melanie. Thanks,
Thank
everyone. You can
you.
join the next session at 6:45. So
6:50.
6:50, which will be a keynote session. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.